What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest leading men comes face to face with a talk show host who refuses to hold back? In just seconds, a simple conversation turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. Before we dive into this absolute chaos, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations the industry doesn't want you to see, and the drama that unfolds when cameras keep rolling and tempers flare. Last night on The View, Brad Pitt sat down for what was supposed to be a conversation about his latest film project. Instead, what unfolded was a battle that left the entire studio speechless, and Brad walking off the set in fury. From the moment Brad walked onto that stage, something felt different. The audience gave him the usual enthusiastic applause, excited to see one of the biggest movie stars in the world sitting on their favorite talk show. He smiled, waved, and took his seat at the table with all the hosts. But if you were watching closely, you could see something in Behar's expression that suggested this wasn't going to be the light, fun interview everyone expected. The conversation started innocently enough. The hosts asked Brad about his new movie, about working with the director, about the challenges of filming in remote locations. Brad answered with his typical charm, making jokes about the weather on set, telling interesting stories from behind the scenes, sharing funny anecdotes about his co-stars. The audience laughed at all the right moments. The other hosts seemed engaged and friendly, asking follow-up questions and nodding along enthusiastically. Everything appeared to be going exactly as planned. Just another celebrity interview on a daytime talk show. But Joy had been quieter than usual throughout this whole exchange. She sat there at the end of the table, watching Brad with an intensity that was hard to read, waiting for her moment. Her arms were crossed, and there was something in her expression that suggested she had an agenda beyond the surface-level movie promotion talk. And then, about 10 minutes into the interview, she found her opening and took it without hesitation. "So Brad, I want to shift gears for a moment," Joy said, her tone changing noticeably from friendly to confrontational. "There's been a lot of discussion lately about your comments regarding modern masculinity and how men should behave in Hollywood today. Some people found your remarks pretty problematic, to say the least." The energy in the studio shifted immediately, like someone had flipped a switch. Brad's smile faded slightly, and you could see him tense up in his chair, his shoulders stiffening. The other hosts exchanged quick glances, clearly not expecting Joy to go in this direction. This wasn't on the pre-approved list of topics. This was Joy going rogue, and everyone could sense it. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Brad said carefully, his media training kicking in. "I've talked about a lot of things in various interviews over the years. You'll have to be more specific about which comments you're talking about." "Come on, Brad," Joy pressed, leaning forward with a challenging look in her eyes. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't play coy. You made comments in that magazine interview about how men need to toughen up and stop being so sensitive about everything. In an era where we're finally having real conversations about toxic masculinity and the harm it causes, those comments were tone-deaf at best and actively harmful at worst." Brad shifted in his seat uncomfortably, his jaw tightening as he processed what Joy had just said. "That's not what I said, Joy. You're oversimplifying a nuanced conversation I had about personal responsibility and emotional maturity. Those are two very different things from what you're suggesting." "Are they though?" Joy shot back, quickly, not giving him a moment to breathe. "Because what I heard, and what a lot of people heard, was a wealthy white man telling other men to stop complaining about their problems and just deal with it. That sounds pretty privileged to me, Brad." The audience was completely silent now. You could feel the discomfort spreading through the studio like a wave. This had gone from a friendly celebrity interview to something much more confrontational in a matter of seconds, and nobody knew quite how to react. The other hosts looked increasingly uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. "Hold on a second," Brad said, his voice getting noticeably firmer. "You're putting words in my mouth and assigning meaning that wasn't there. I was talking specifically about the importance of facing your problems head on instead of avoiding them or waiting for someone else to fix them. How is that controversial? How is encouraging personal growth and resilience a bad thing? It's controversial when you're someone who's lived a life of incredible privilege and you're telling regular people how they should handle their struggles. Joy responded without missing a beat. You don't get to dictate how others should deal with their pain when you've never experienced what they go through. You don't know what it's like to struggle financially, to face real systemic barriers, to feel powerless in your own life. Brad's expression hardened considerably. You could see the frustration building in his eyes, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. So, because I've been successful in my career, I'm not allowed to have opinions about personal growth? That's ridiculous, Joy, and you know it. Success doesn't invalidate someone's perspective or their right to share what they've learned. What's ridiculous is you thinking your experience translates to everyone else's reality. Joy fired back, her voice rising. You grew up in a different world than most people. You've had opportunities that most people will never have access to, and yet you feel comfortable telling them they're too sensitive, that they need to toughen up? Do you not see how that comes across? I never said anyone was too sensitive. Brad's voice rose noticeably, his composure starting to slip. You're completely twisting what I said to fit whatever narrative you've decided to push today. This is exactly what's wrong with these conversations. People like you take one quote, strip away all the context, ignore everything else I said in that interview, and then attack someone for something they didn't even say. Joy wasn't backing down even slightly. If anything, Brad's frustration seemed to energize her. People like me? What's that supposed to mean, Brad? People who ask tough questions? People who hold celebrities accountable for their words. It means people who are more interested in creating controversy than having honest conversations, Brad said, his frustration now fully visible in his body language and tone. You brought me on this show under the pretense of talking about my movie, about my work, but clearly you had a completely different agenda from the start. This was a setup. One of the other hosts tried to step in, her voice calm and measured as she attempted to diffuse the situation. Let's all take a breath here. Maybe we can have this conversation in a way that's productive for everyone. We're all adults here. But Joy wasn't interested in de-escalating. She had Brad on the defensive, and she was pressing her advantage. No, I want to hear Brad explain himself. If I'm misunderstanding his comments, if I'm getting it wrong, then he should clarify what he meant. What exactly were you saying about masculinity, Brad? Spell it out for us. Brad took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain what was left of his composure. His jaw was clenched, his eyes focused intently on Joy. What I was saying, if you had actually listened to the full interview instead of cherry-picking quotes, is that everyone, regardless of gender, needs to take responsibility for their own emotional well-being. That we need to stop waiting for the world to change around us and start doing the internal work to improve ourselves. That's not toxic masculinity. That's basic human growth and development. But you specifically framed it in terms of men needing to be stronger, Joy challenged, not letting up for a second. You used language that reinforces harmful stereotypes about what it means to be a man in this society, whether you intended to or not, whether you realize it or not. That's what you did. And impact matters more than intent. I didn't use the word stronger, Brad corrected her, his voice sharp. I used the word resilient. There's a significant difference between those two concepts. Resilience isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending problems don't exist. It's about developing the tools and the mental fortitude to handle adversity in healthy, productive ways. How is that a bad message? Semantics, Joy said dismissively, with a wave of her hand that clearly infuriated Brad. You're splitting hairs to avoid taking accountability for promoting damaging ideas about masculinity. Call it what you want, but the message is the same. That's when Brad's composure started to seriously crack. His face was flushed, his voice getting louder. Accountability? You want to talk about accountability? How about you take accountability for completely misrepresenting what I said? How about you take accountability for ambushing me on your show with this gotcha journalism bullshit? How about you take accountability for having zero interest in an honest conversation? The audience gasped audibly at Brad's use of profanity. The other hosts looked absolutely stunned, their mouths hanging open slightly. Joy's eyes widened for just a moment, but she didn't look intimidated or apologetic. If anything, she seemed energized by Brad's reaction, like she had successfully gotten under his skin and was ready to press even harder. "So now you're swearing at me because I asked you a tough question?" Joy said, her voice dripping with sarcasm and condescension. "This is exactly the problem with men like you, Brad. The moment you're challenged on your words, the moment someone questions your perspective, you get defensive and angry instead of engaging in honest dialogue. You can't handle criticism." "Honest dialogue?" Brad laughed, but there was absolutely no humor in the sound. It was bitter and angry and full of frustration. "There's nothing honest about what you're doing right now, Joy. You're not trying to understand my perspective. You're not interested in what I actually believe, or why I believe it. You're trying to paint me as some villain for your audience, to make yourself look good by making me look bad. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job, pure and simple." "Oh, please," Joy scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Don't play the victim here, Brad. You're a grown man who made public statements that people reacted to. If you can't handle being questioned about those statements, if you can't handle someone pushing back on your ideas, maybe you shouldn't be making them in the first place. Maybe you should think before you speak." "I can handle being questioned," Brad said, his voice rising to a near shout. "What I can't handle, what I won't tolerate, is being deliberately misquoted and then attacked for things I didn't say. You're not questioning me, Joy. You're prosecuting me based on a false premise. There's a huge difference between those two things." Joy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms in a gesture that radiated defiance and certainty. "So, everyone who had a problem with your comments just misunderstood you? All the people who were hurt by what you said, all the critics who pointed out the problems with your statements, we're all too stupid to comprehend your brilliant insights about masculinity? Is that what you're saying?" "That's not what I said." Brad was almost shouting now, his face red, his hands gesturing emphatically. "Stop putting words in my mouth. This is insane. You're literally doing it again right now in real time. You're twisting everything I say to fit your narrative." The tension in the studio had reached an absolutely critical point. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every single moment of this heated exchange. The producers were probably having complete meltdowns in the control room, screaming into their headsets about what to do, but no one was cutting to commercial. This was too explosive, too dramatic, too compelling to stop. This was the kind of television that people would be talking about for years. "I'm not putting words in your mouth," Joy said firmly, her voice strong and unwavering. "I'm holding up a mirror to what you said, and you don't like what you see reflected back at you. You don't like being confronted with the reality of how your words land in the real world." "That's not a mirror," Brad shot back immediately, his voice shaking with emotion. "That's a funhouse mirror that's distorting everything beyond recognition, twisting my words into something unrecognizable. And I'm not going to sit here and let you do this to me on national television." "So what are you going to do?" Joy challenged, her voice rising to match his intensity. "Storm off the set because someone dared to push back on your privileged perspective? Is that your plan? Privileged perspective?" Brad stood up from his chair so abruptly that it actually rocked backward. The movement was sudden and aggressive enough that several people in the audience visibly flinched. "You know what, Joy? You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know the struggles I've faced, the demons I've battled, the pain I've endured, and you certainly don't get to sit there in your comfortable chair and lecture me about privilege when you've spent your entire career in television, making millions of dollars, giving your opinions to millions of people. How is that not privilege?" Joy stood up now too, matching his energy, refusing to be intimidated. At least I'm honest about who I am and what I believe. I don't hide behind vague platitudes about personal responsibility while ignoring the systemic issues that affect people's lives. I don't pretend that individual effort is enough to overcome structural inequality. Vague platitudes? Brad's voice was shaking with anger now, his whole body tense. I've spent years working on mental health advocacy. I've opened up publicly about my own struggles with depression and addiction, things that were incredibly difficult and painful to share. I've used my platform, the one you're so quick to dismiss, to try to help people, to try to make a difference. And you're sitting here reducing all of that work, all of that vulnerability, to vague platitudes? Your mental health advocacy is admirable, Joy said, her tone slightly softer, but still fundamentally challenging. I'm not denying that, but it doesn't give you a free pass to make statements that reinforce harmful gender stereotypes. You can do good work in one area and still mess up in another. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what you refuse to accept. No, what you're trying to do is score points with your audience by making me look bad, Brad countered, his voice cutting. You had no interest in a real conversation from the moment I sat down. You wanted a confrontation, you wanted conflict, you wanted to create a moment, and congratulations, Joy, you got one. I hope it was worth it. The other hosts were trying desperately to interject now, multiple voices overlapping as they attempted to calm the situation down before it spiraled even further out of control. Let's all just take a step back, one of them said, her voice shaky and uncertain. This is getting way too heated. We can have this conversation without it turning into a fight. Let's be adults about this. It's already a fight, Brad said, pulling his microphone off with such force that the cable made a loud popping sound through the audio system. Because Joy decided that's what she wanted it to be from the very beginning. Well, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm not going to be your entertainment, your villain for the day. Where are you going? Joy called after him as he started moving toward the edge of the set, his movements quick and purposeful. You're really going to walk out just because you got called out? Just because someone had the courage to challenge you? Brad turned back to face her, and the look on his expression was a powerful mixture of anger, disappointment, and something that looked almost like betrayal. Called out? Is that what you think this was? You didn't call me out on anything, Joy. You created a straw man, a version of my beliefs, a caricature that bears no resemblance to what I actually think. And then you attacked it. That's not holding someone accountable. That's not journalism. That's intellectual dishonesty at its finest. Intellectual dishonesty? Joy's voice rose to match his, her face flushed. You want to talk about dishonesty? How about you pretending that your comments exist in a vacuum, separate from the broader context of how society views masculinity? You're a smart man, Brad. You know that words have impact beyond their literal meaning. You know that context matters. Stop playing dumb. Of course I know that, Brad shouted, his patience completely evaporated now. Why do you think I've been so careful about how I talk about these issues? Why do you think I've spent so much time explaining my perspective in detailed, nuanced interviews? Because I understand the complexity. Because I care about how my words land. But you don't care about any of that. You just want your viral moment, your clip that will get shared on social media. That's all this is to you. This isn't about a viral moment, Joy shot back, her voice firm and unyielding. This is about using this platform to have important conversations about issues that actually matter to people's lives. If that makes you uncomfortable, if that challenges your worldview, that's your problem, not mine. That's not my responsibility to manage. You're right, it is my problem, Brad said, his voice now eerily calm, in a way that was somehow more intense than the shouting. My problem for thinking I could come on this show and have a respectful conversation. My problem for believing that you actually cared about understanding my perspective, rather than just tearing it down for applause. My problem for having any faith in the integrity of this process. That's on me. I own that mistake. One of the other hosts stood up now, trying to physically position herself between Brad and Joy, attempting to create some space and diffuse the situation. Brad, please, let's just sit back down and talk through this calmly. We can work this out. We're all reasonable people here. But Brad was already shaking his head, already backing toward the exit, his decision clearly made. There's nothing to work out. You can't have a productive conversation with someone who's already decided you're the villain. You can't reason with someone who's already made up their mind about who you are and what you believe. I've learned that lesson today, and I'm not going to keep banging my head against that wall. So that's it? Joy called out, still standing at the table, her arms crossed defiantly. You're just going to run away because someone challenged your worldview? Some personal growth advocate you are. Some champion of resilience and facing your problems head on. The moment things get difficult, you bail. Brad stopped in his tracks at that comment. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and re-engage, might come back for one more round of this brutal exchange. The entire studio held its breath collectively, waiting to see what would happen next, whether this confrontation would continue or finally reach its conclusion. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. But instead of coming back, Brad just looked at Joy with an expression that combined frustration, disappointment, and what looked like genuine sadness, and said his final words to her. You know what the saddest part of all this is, Joy? I actually agreed to come on this show because I thought you were smarter than this. I thought you understood the difference between challenging someone's ideas in good faith and character assassination. I thought you had more integrity than to ambush a guest like this. I was wrong about you. I was completely wrong. And I'm not going to stand here and be your punching bag so you can feel righteous in front of your audience. Character assassination? Joy's voice dripped with sarcasm and disbelief. Oh, please, give me a break. I asked you about statements you made publicly, statements that are on the record. If you consider that character assassination, you have thinner skin than I thought possible for someone in your position. Think whatever you want about me, Brad said, turning away again with finality. I don't care anymore. I'm done here. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with this ambush. I'm just done. That's right, walk away, Joy called after him, her voice cutting across the studio like a blade. Walk away when the conversation gets difficult. Walk away when someone holds a mirror up to your privilege and your blind spots. That's the easy way out, isn't it? That's what people with privilege always do when they're confronted with uncomfortable truths. Brad paused one final time at the door leading backstage. Without turning around to face her, without even looking back over his shoulder, he spoke loud enough for everyone in the studio to hear, his voice carrying across the space. The only thing I'm walking away from is someone who's more interested in winning an argument than seeking truth. The only thing I'm walking away from is someone who values being right over being honest. Enjoy your show, Joy. Enjoy your moment. I hope it was worth whatever this cost you. And with that, Brad Pitt pushed through the door and disappeared backstage, leaving Joy Behar standing at the table, the other hosts in complete shock, and an audience that couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The camera operators kept filming, catching every moment of the aftermath, as Joy slowly sat back down, her expression unreadable. The other hosts looked at each other, clearly shaken by what had just transpired. One of them had tears in her eyes. Another looked pale, like she might be sick. They had been part of thousands of interviews over the years, but nothing had ever escalated quite like this. Nothing had ever felt this personal, this raw, this explosive. Joy picked up her notes, shuffled them unnecessarily, and cleared her throat. For the first time since Brad had left, she looked slightly less certain, slightly less confident. But she didn't apologize. She didn't express regret. She simply moved forward, because that's what live television required. The production team finally cut to commercial, but everyone in that studio knew that the damage was done. What was supposed to be a friendly celebrity interview promoting a new movie had turned into one of the most confrontational moments in The View's history. Brad Pitt, one of the most famous actors in the world, had just walked off their set after a heated argument that had gotten completely out of control. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just seen. Some people were already on their phones, texting friends about the confrontation. Others were looking at each other with wide eyes, trying to make sense of how things had escalated so quickly. A few people looked genuinely upset, like they had witnessed something they shouldn't have seen. Backstage, you could hear raised voices and rapid movement as Brad's team worked to get him out of the building as quickly as possible. His publicist was probably already on the phone, doing damage control. Security was escorting him to his car. The whole carefully planned media appearance had completely fallen apart, turning into exactly the kind of public spectacle that every celebrity tries to avoid. Back on the set, the mood was heavy. The magic of live television had captured an authentic moment of conflict, but it came at a cost. Relationships had been strained, reputations would be affected, and everyone who witnessed it knew they had just seen something that would be talked about for a very long time. This was raw, unfiltered television at its most intense. No script could have written this confrontation. No producer could have choreographed the genuine anger and frustration that had exploded between these two people. It was real emotion, real conflict, and real consequences playing out in real time for millions of viewers to see. The debate would rage on social media for weeks. Some would say Joy crossed a line, that she ambushed a guest with unfair accusations and misrepresentations. Others would argue that she was simply doing her job as a journalist, holding a powerful celebrity accountable for his public statements. People would take sides, form opinions, and argue endlessly about who was right and who was wrong. But in that moment, in that studio, there was no debate about one thing. Brad Pitt had just walked off The View after one of the most heated confrontations in daytime television history, and nothing would ever quite be the same.